Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We have the author of The Case to Impeach and Imprison Joe Biden, ex-White House stenographer and whistleblower Mike McCormick. Gonna be a banger of an episode. You're not gonna want to miss it. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. We are back. We are now joined by Mike McCormick. Now, Mike, we've had you on the program before. We had you on before the book was released, so there were a few things that were kind of teasing. We'll certainly talk about the aspects that you have now discussed now that this book is out. You've got a new book on the way. We're also going to talk a little bit on the tail end of that. But for those who are unfamiliar with you, you are not just an ex-Biden stenographer. You work for the White House for some time. So just give the audience a synopsis of where you kind of fit in this executive branch.
Well, thanks for having me back, Jason. So my job with the Biden White House, I was a White House press office stenographer assigned specifically to Joe Biden from 2011 to 2017. He left in January 2017. But I had worked there for President Bush from 2002 to, I worked there for a period of time, 2002 to 2007, President Bush. Left, came back for Obama and a little bit of Trump from 2010 to 2018. So I worked for three presidents. I worked for Bush, Obama, and Trump. And then it turns out the fourth person I worked for became President Joe Biden. I wrote my book, The Case to Impeach and Imprison Joe Biden, because I don't think he was elected legally. I don't think he was actually ever a president. And based on the crimes that I found in the Hunter Biden laptop, which I was given a copy of early on in the process by Marco Polo, Garrett Ziegler, their anti-corruption nonprofit, I was able to look through there and find out what Joe Biden really did, what he was talking about with Hunter and Devin Archer and all these people, and the cover-up that was going on in the Obama White House at the time. And so I wrote that book. It came out in January, right around Christmas time, late December, early January, and did real well. Got a lot of attention because at the time, people kept thinking Joe Biden was going to get impeached. Eventually, he never did. The reason I wrote the book was as a whistleblower, I was interviewed by the House Oversight Committee investigators last year. And I had things to say that they never used against Joe. And they never put me under oath. And then I tried to get in touch with the special counsel, David Weiss. And they never put me under oath. They didn't want me to testify against Joe Biden because they wanted this outcome where he doesn't really pay for his crimes. So I wrote the book to say, yeah, he committed these crimes. This is the evidence. I'm a witness. And I'm an unexamined witness.
So let's talk about that, because the system, for instance, we live in an era where Joe Biden has been the quote unquote president of the United States for almost the last 4 years. Anybody paying attention to just the Democratic primary debates could clearly see he had onset dementia. He was a shell of his former self then. I mean, again, we'll get into that with you because you're somebody that also spent time with him behind the scenes. I imagine it was probably in those first few debates that it was very apparent he was not the man he once was. But we let that run all throughout this presidency until this debate where all of a sudden the mainstream media now admits, oh, it does look like he's lost a step and maybe he shouldn't run, etc. And maybe there is a mental thing. And to the point where they install the vice president as the Democratic nominee. They pushed Joe aside at the DNC after the first night. He did not look good then. He did speak for a lot longer than I thought he was going to be able to. There's still this facade that he's running the presidency. Yet, as you stated, the outcome that they wanted through these investigations was to say, bad Joe, we're not going to do anything about it. I mean, case in point, one of the things that they're pointing out is that he is not mentally fit to stand any type of trial. Then how is he mentally
Right.
fit to run the country? So we're kind of in this inverted post-truth world. When you
Mm.
talk about actual whistleblowing, do you think that there's any hope that your testimony and others will lead to criminal prosecutions anywhere else within this network other than Joe Biden himself?
Well, that depends entirely on if Donald Trump gets elected. I mean, I think if he gets elected and comes in, there will be investigations done into the background of, the Burisma Holdings. That is still ongoing. That's a conspiracy. In my book, I involve Jake Sullivan as a co-conspirator. I involve people in the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, Ukraine, as co-conspirators. And it was really disappointing to me when I had gone through this like a 2-hour interview with the House Oversight investigators, and then also in the Senate Homeland Security Governmental Affairs Committee investigators last summer, just about a year ago. And they started doing these interviews of Devin Archer and Hunter Biden, and they never asked the questions that they could have. That's why I wrote the book. And those questions I don't think they asked because they led to high profile, a really broad swath of corruption. And, this new book I have coming out is even crazier. That thing will take down a whole swath of Obama administration people and deep state activity. Um, Getting just briefly to Joe Biden's diminished mental capacity. So I got a little bit of. I wrote a book in 2020 in March as all those lockdowns hit called Joe Biden Authorized in the 2020 Crack. That one right behind me. And I self-published it. It didn't get any notice because of everyone was just focused on COVID. But I did say, look, this guy is impossible to be. He's not presidential. Well, as I was promoting the book, by the time the fall of 2020 rolled around, when they were starting to look at the presidential campaign, I got a little bit of splash of publicity saying, look, Joe Biden is half the man he used to be. So that was in September of 2020. I could see how diminished he was. He wasn't physical. He wasn't anywhere as physically adept as he was in 2018, just 2 years earlier. He was mentally, he's a lot sharper then than he is now, but he was still a lot slower than he used to be. So there was a huge downturn. He was on a downslope, and it really accelerated over the last year. And I thought that because he had this cadre of operatives around him, and he was out there saying, I'm not leaving until God tells me to. I thought that he was going to bluff his way into a presidential run. And they took him out. They got rid of him. And now he's, like you said, will he face jail time? No, he's got that get out of jail free card because he's old and infirm. But he can. The stuff that I found that he's guilty of, that it has co-conspirators involved, the statute of limitations is still operative on it. And it all happened when he was vice president, so he can't use presidential immunity as an excuse. Hunter Biden is going to go on trial in a couple weeks out in Los Angeles. The U.S. attorney from Delaware, who became the special counsel, David Weiss, he had put him on trial in June for a gun charge, and Hunter Biden was found guilty. And I attended that trial, and my whole reason for going up there was I knew they would have a post-trial press conference. I attended the press conference, and I said, why won't you let me testify in front of your special counsel grand jury? I have evidence that Joe Biden conducted crimes in Air Force Two. And I yelled it out to them, and they ran out of the room. Later that morning, I was sitting out in front of the building, and one of the prosecutors came out, a guy named Leo Wise. And I literally chased him down the street saying, Leo, and I'd sent him a copy of my Joe Biden unauthorized, Joe Biden, the case to impeach and imprison Joe Biden. I sent it to his office saying, there's evidence in here that Joe Biden is part of this case. He ran away from me, and I'm saying, Leo, you got to have me in front of the grand jury. He's like, I can't talk to you about the grand jury. I can't talk to you about the grand jury. I'm like, I've got evidence that Joe Biden committed crimes that I can present to your grand jury. You don't want evidence of Joe Biden's crimes? I can't talk to you about grand jury. And he ran off. So that's where they are. I mean, I at least got that chance to confront those two people. Why didn't you put me in front of your grand jury? They didn't. They've been covering for Joe Biden ever since. And to some extent, this House Oversight Committee process was also a cover-up. I think there were members on the House Oversight Committee who really wanted it to go through, but there weren't enough of them. And they were overpowered behind the scenes by rhinos and people who probably either sold out to Biden or were compromised by Biden somehow. And they just said, yeah, we're just going to have it, just like you said, tap on the wrist and let him go. So that's kind of where we are now. We'll see more of how they look at Joe Biden and his presidency, this fake presidency that he has, as this Hunter Biden trial unravels. But it's really an interesting time because Joe Biden is twisting in the wind. This is a president without any power. The people that backed him in the government don't back him anymore. He's sitting on the beach. So what happens to him? What happens to America? And can he be criminally tried? Because suddenly, as he's no longer the president, he is still the president. He's no longer the headline of the presidency. So what does that mean for the league? Is the deep state going to move against Joe Biden? They potentially could. Or they could just stand back and let things occur. So we'll see what happens if Trump comes in. I really hope he does. It's going to come down to an all-out brawl for valid ballots to keep these illegal immigrants to keep the Democrats from using the excuse of illegal immigrant mail-in voters to flood the voting rolls with mail-in ballots that are illegal. But we'll see. I mean, I have high hopes that there's a lot of momentum out there. There's a lot of activism in Republicans on the Republican voter integrity side. Scott Prusser's out there signing up people in Pennsylvania. We'll see. I hope it works out. I got to feel like there's always a tipping point in the elections. I've been involved in a lot of them in the White House, and it usually comes around the middle of October. It doesn't seem like Kamala Harris has any momentum and has the ability to push the tipping point, whereas on the Trump side, it's pushing the tipping point.
Well, let me say this, Mike. I think that when you talk about October and the possibility that Joe Biden maybe just steps down to legitimize Kamala Harris as the president, and then they install Waltz as the vice president amidst some kind of a catastrophic moment or event overseas, or maybe even in this country. But if something pops off in the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, obviously the media has now already admitted he's diminished. There's a big push for Kamala among that moment. I think that is a possibility for an October surprise. And with all the other corruption, that's just one of the tools via media narrative to try to take this election and really have the inability to audit it as well, because when you are in some kind of a military mode and situation, the lines get blurred and things get even darker. We're going to take a quick break. Yeah. When we come back, I want to talk about some of that Biden corruption, Burisma in particular, for those that are unaware, as it is ongoing. This is Making Sense of the Madness, and we'll be back with Mike McCormick after this.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
Don't let them win. Patriot TV is committed to delivering the truth. America's new network for patriots is growing fast, and we'd love you to join us as a member of Patriot TV. Your support makes it possible for us to continue to deliver unbiased reporting, thought-provoking discussions, and insights you won't find anywhere else. From in-depth interviews to behind-the-scenes footage, Patriot TV brings you closer to the voices shaping our nation's future. Whether it's political developments, cultural shifts, or global affairs, Patriot TV keeps you informed and empowered. As a member of Patriot TV, you'll get perks like personal invitations to exclusive Patriot TV events, where you can gather and network with like-minded Americans. We'll also host online events throughout the year with General Flynn, who's committed to host live Q&A webinars where callers like you can ask him questions and get real answers. Access to these events will be members only, so go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member. It's fast and easy. We have a great membership option starting at just $9.99 a month, or save with our annual membership for only $99, or take advantage of the best value, the 2-year membership for just $159. Go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member. It's fast and easy. Do your part to make sure the truth gets out to all patriots and help ensure future programming. Become a member today. Just go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member, join today.
And we are back. We are with Mike McCormick. Now, Mike, before the break, you really described a system of corruption and outright controlled opposition when it comes to high-level accountability within government. Whenever I see a whistleblower and there isn't pushback on that person and they're not being demonized in the media, et cetera, very skeptical when they're worshipped, because I've just seen so many whistleblowers over the past 2+ decades doing this, like yourself, that no one wants to touch, that no one wants to talk to, that if they do talk to, it's in a closed room. There is no printed deposition that goes out into the public arena. There is no trial by which you are called as a witness, et cetera. It goes on and on and on. So when we are talking about Burisma in particular, if you had told me when I was reporting, I think it was all the way back in 2017, when Joe Biden got up before the Council on Foreign Relations with Richard Haass and some other little minion, cackling about $1 billion to Ukraine that he was withholding because a prosecutor hadn't been fired. That prosecutor just happened to be investigating his son and others within the D.C. cabal, if you will, in a corruption case. And, you know, the response is, well, you're not the president of the United States. You can't do that. I'm going to be on a plane in a few hours. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. I'll take the $1 billion with me. Literally goes Joey B style, goes, well, son of a bitch. And it's a big laugh fest, and everybody's having a good time. You had told me that would have been the modus operandi for the second Trump impeachment. I would have, how? And then it is. I mean, we're in bizarro town. So for those that don't know what this Burisma energy scandal is, I'd love for you to give a synopsis. Now, in that, you have evidence via Air Force Two as you travel with these people as a stenographer that you were volunteering. Go into that as well.
So, and the clip you're talking about was actually January 2018 with the Council of Foreign Relations. So the book in the case of impeachment President Joe Biden, I was on that trip that he took to Ukraine, and it was December of 2015. And I after talking to the House Oversight Committee, I realized they were looking at it. So I started digging into it. Having been there, they were very interested in what I saw and did there. There were some meetings that we had with the press there, with other people on the entourage, not Joe Biden, but Jake Sullivan and the ambassador and Pyatt and Jeffrey Pyatt. And Victoria Nuland was there. One of the things that happened on that trip was he walked down the arrival stairs of Air Force Two and shook hands with a guy named Vitaly Klitschko. Vitaly Klitschko was then the mayor of Kyiv, and they made a little film about it. So there's a video, a White House video of this meeting. It's called "He Was a Greeter." Vitaly
Klitschko, is that of the Klitschko brothers, the famous boxers turned politicians? Obviously, right?
That is correct.
There's not a lot of Vitaly. For those that don't know, the Klitschko brothers were bad mother effers for a very long time and got into the political arena, very anti-Putin at some point as well, almost a part of that Western propaganda machine when it comes to building a narrative surrounding Ukraine. Sorry to interrupt, but yes, continue.
No, Good, because you know who he is. So he was a big part of the Maidan uprising. He was a background guy. So he gets elected to be the mayor of Kyiv in like 2014. So this is 2015. Joe shows up with this and greets him at the bottom of the stairs. Well, when he greets him, Vitaly Klitschko is on the board of a company called Burisma Geothermal. He's working directly with Hunter Biden. He's being paid by Burisma. And that's on a video. And just days before Joe took this trip, there was a Burisma board meeting in Dubai. And so this is one of the questions that the oversight committee guys didn't ask. They didn't ask Devin Archer, was Vitaly Klitschko there? Devin Archer, in his testimony, said, I was there, Hunter was there. Hunter talked to his dad on the phone during this meeting, and he was talking with them about his dad just to say hi and how's the weather. I mean, that's the lie they tell. But really, Hunter checked in with his dad right before he comes on this trip. If Vitaly Klitschko was at this board meeting, which I believe was the case, but no one's admitted it, then they would have told him, we want you to go to Ukraine and be the greeter for Joe. This is Joe working with Burisma directly to get rid of the prosecutor, Viktor Shokin. Because when Joe shows up in Ukraine on this trip, all the press, that video, that White House video was never shown in America. It was shown in Ukraine. It was for the Ukraine audience, news organizations, websites, all those things. He's shaking Vitaly Klitschko's hand. That tells the government, Poroshenko's government, hey, they knew Vitaly Klitschko was with Burisma. That was Joe telling him, hey, I'm here to do business for Burisma. And that's what he did. So he has his meetings with Poroshenko and Yatsenyuk, the prime minister. And that's when he lays down this threat right before we left. And so, yeah, he was working for Burisma. There's no question about it. If you read my book, it's absolutely laid out there. And that's why they never put me under oath, because they didn't want Joe Biden to be pulled into this, to be publicly guilty. And so they didn't.
What do you think another aspect of your book that's, important, most people don't understand or even know about, because we have been shielded of so much of this corruption? Forget about the mainstream media, right? They've been running cover forever. But the truth of the matter is, I love the alternative media. I've been part of it for a very long time. A lot of times they echo the same talking points. You do these interviews all the time. I'm sure you're saying the same things again and again. I've been on those trains when I've released documentary films, etc. We try not to do that here. We try to expand on it. Sure, we need repetition of history when we can point to a video like that, the propaganda, etc. But what do you think an aspect of your book, again, that is important, will surprise people?
Well, this is what surprised me was there's two parts of the book. There's the Burisma corruption, and then there's a whole part of it called Joe Biden's Alliance for Prosperity. So in 2014, in the spring of 2014, all these unaccompanied minor kids start showing up at the southern border. They don't know what to do with them. It becomes a crisis. So this is when they built the cages for kids along the southern border. 60,000 kids came across their southern border that summer. So Joe Biden's answer was to set up this thing called the Alliance for Prosperity, where they gave $1.5 billion in foreign assistance to 3 tiny countries: El Salvador, Honduras, and, the one's not Nicaragua, but it's another one down there. I can't remember right off the top of my head. I'll remember in a minute. So 3 tiny countries. And what happened was the guys from Honduras were smuggling drugs in the United States by the ton. And so Joe Biden set up he gave them $500 million to go to through this Alliance for Prosperity. The president of Honduras right then, his brother and he were smuggling cocaine with the Sinaloa cartel. Well, I wrote all this stuff in there, and people the reporters didn't want to report on it. No one really wanted to cover it. It was called Alliance for Prosperity. And they really dodged around it. Well, what I realized, the reason I'm writing my new book is part of that Alliance for Prosperity was pulling the Catholic Church into the trafficking of children and people, human trafficking along the southern border. That's what this invasion, this migrant invasion is, illegal immigrant invasion. The Pope Francis calls them migrants. He was just out last week saying, if you don't accept migrants in your country, you're a bad person or something like that. Well, Pope Francis, according to what I've seen, and the reason I saw it was I thought to myself at one point, I was watching somebody else's podcast, and they were talking about this overwhelming sense of evil. And I was like, what was the most evil thing that I knew about in the Obama-Biden White House? And it was Joe Biden being very close with former Catholic Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. McCarrick was an abuser of children. He raped altar boys and seminarians. And he finally got thrown out of the priesthood in 2019. He was sort of found out in 2017. But up until then, he was a favorite of DC politicians and media. He was the Irish Catholic go-to guy for St. Patrick's Day, for the festivities up on Capitol Hill, the prayer breakfasts. He was always there. Well, behind the scenes, he was a bad guy, but he was also very political. He started working, he would travel to China and Iran on behalf of the Catholic Church. He started doing that in the 90s. Based on what I've seen, I personally think he was an operative for the CIA. I don't think he was actually a cardinal. I think he was doing intelligence work. And so what happened was they used him and his connections into the Vatican to put Pope Francis into the role of being Pope. You know, it was a very strange transition. In 2012, February, Pope Benedict says, I'm old, I'm going to retire. Well, then they have this conclave. McCarrick is over there. He's very involved in the conclave behind the scenes. And then Pope Francis gets elected. Well, McCarrick was very close with Pope Francis. And there's a lot in my book about how close he was and how much travel he did back and forth with him.
Mike, let's take a quick break, because I know that you got an upcoming book, and I certainly want to explore this, because when you talk about someone like McCarrick, and him, you know, basically being the darling of DC up until 2017. Hey, newsflash, folks. It isn't, you know, it's common knowledge that the Catholic Church for a very long time has been involved in the abuse of children and covering up the upper echelons of that organization who do so. We're going to talk about that, and I definitely want to get into this CIA asset angle. More Making Sense of the Madness after this.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store, a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
I don't know about you, but I have to have that cup of coffee in the morning. And Kingdom Cup is mold-free, it is pesticide-free, and it is organic. It's got this flavor that is delicious. You don't even have to put cream or sweetener in it.
Why did we go with the bean form, the whole bean? Because ultimately the powder form is the one that gathers the most moisture. And that means the more potential mold development. This is actually organic, mold-free, certified. That's important because ultimately people drink coffee. It's cultural. And so we tried to meet the culture where it is and create a healthy alternative.
Make the healthy choice for you and your family. Try mold-free, pesticide-free, and it's organic. Delicious Kingdom Cup coffee. And it's available now at the Patriot TV store. Go to patriot.tv and click on store. You'll find Kingdom Cup coffee in the health and wellness section. Order Kingdom Cup coffee at the Patriot TV store now.
So, Mike, before we get into everything you just hit on, I mean, you just talked, first of all, Pope Benedict. does a very short stint there. Now, I'm not stumping for Pope Benedict at all. Dude looked like something out of, Star Wars, the Emperor. He had the
Yeah.
Nazi youth background, etc. I think it was only a couple years that he was in there. Maybe it certainly wasn't 5. I know that it was pretty short for a pope. Then you get.
I think it was about. I think it was about 6. I think it was 2006 to 2012, and he was very conservative. So the Obama people didn't like him. He was pushing back on a lot of their liberal ideas, and there's basically been a battle in the background of the church between liberal theology and very conservative theology. Pope Francis is very liberal.
Well, that's where I was getting to. Now, when Pope Francis comes into the mix, he's riding motorcycles. He's got leather jacket. This ain't your daddy's pope, right? This is the new cool pope that they sell you on. Now, at the same time, obviously, they haven't cleaned up this system. A lot of people out there, I've been doing this a very long time. Everybody loves to talk about groups, right? This group runs this group runs that. The Vatican always comes up. Now, the Vatican, you could argue, did pioneer some of the same intelligence tools via information, et cetera, that we utilize today. I would also argue, I would also argue that when you're talking about child trafficking and abuse, the Catholic Church has absolutely been notorious with this. Now, there's been a lot of politicians that have also been caught on both sides. I would talk about Dennis Hassert. I mean, talk about the upper echelons of the Republican Party. This is a guy that was abusing kids before he was a politician. He was the Speaker of the House. Then you have the intelligence aspects. They love compromised individuals. And quite frankly, back in the 80s or 90s, you get away with compromising somebody just with their mistress, right? Gary Hart style. Hey, Gary, you want to be president? How about we leak some photographs of you and your mistress on a boat to the Inquirer? That type of thing.
Right.
Morality moves. People don't care. They love pedophiles. That morality, thank God, to this day, has not moved. So, I would argue whether or not you're correct that McCormick started out as a CIA agent. There is certainly, especially with being compromised like that, the idea that the intelligence networks would move in there and utilize him as an asset, where if he didn't, he might just become one of those cardinals that couldn't be moved again and, couldn't get away with it, et cetera, as long. What do you think?
Well, so McCarrick, he had all kinds of contacts that he was doing. He traveled around the world. And they never really, there's a huge report done by the Vatican after he got caught. And he got caught in 2017. Basically what happened was Trump came in and all of a sudden they were like, whoa, we got to get rid of this guy. They didn't want to get rid of him until Trump came in and started changing things around behind the scenes. So as soon as Trump came in, within months, there was a credible allegation by a young person who was a minor when he was abused as an altar boy in the 70s. They went way back, and the police investigating. They said, the statute of limitations is over on this, but the Vatican finally kicked it up the stairs. Like you said, they've been holding it back. And McCarrick was one of those guys who was one of the guys that stomped on the investigations. So he starts getting investigated and it starts coming out. They wrote this report and they talk about all the travel he did. And the Vatican is like, we didn't tell him to do this travel. He wasn't really traveling for us. He was traveling to the State Department. Well, how does the State Department put this guy in this position to travel to all these sensitive world locations? China, Cuba, Iran, and do all this work as a Catholic guy, and just sort of, we don't even have any sense that there's a intelligence community aspect to it. So when he comes in, so getting back to the child trafficking around the Alliance for Prosperity, what I saw was I started looking. I took the name McCarrick and typed it into White House visitor logs in 2014. Boom! All of a sudden, I saw all these meetings with McCarrick and Dennis McDonough, who was then Obama's White House chief of staff. McDonough's a Catholic. He has two brothers who were priests. One brother retired. One brother was kind of demoted from a senior position because he was covering up for pedophile priests in Minneapolis. So he's in charge of sort of the Vatican outreach of the Obama administration early on, from like before Obama even gets in. They're reaching out to the Vatican. They're reaching out to Pope Benedict, but then that turns into we want to put we want to put Francis in there, and they use McCarrick. In the summer of 2014, the drug dealing president of Honduras comes to the White House to have these meetings about how to set up the Alliance of Prosperity. He's there. The president of El Salvador is there, and the president of, oh my gosh, I am blocking on the third country. I feel really silly. It's one of the Northern Triangle countries, if you know where they are. And so they come. Well, as soon as they leave, there's all these meetings between McDonough and McCarrick in the White House. They're setting up the Alliance of Prosperity, and they're using the Catholic Church. And the question I have, and I pose in the book, is why did these kids start showing up? Who told them to come there? Because they were being pulled in there by the cartels. These are young kids. Some of them are 4 years old, and they're making this travel from down in Honduras, El Salvador, and I cannot come up. Geez, I'm kicking myself. But anyway,
Yo, Mike, I mean, we're talking about 4-year-olds. That's insane. I mean, how many of these children and how what was the oldest child you saw? You just said 4. I would hope that would be the youngest.
So they were unaccompanied minors. So they're 17. Most of them are between 13 and 17. Most of them are boys. A lot of girls. But the cartels and the coyotes were terrible to these kids. And so they show up at the border, and no one knows why. Like all the Obama officials saying, we don't know why. We think it's just bad crime down in their home countries. Somebody was telling them. Was it the Catholic Church that was telling them? Was it U.S. intelligence agencies put that word out? Or was it, some other entity that was getting these people up there? Because they all came, and the parents were signing off on it. So the mystery is, why did they show up? As many as they did, all at once. Who put the word out? And so then they get rewarded. These countries get rewarded with all this foreign assistance, and the Catholic Church gets rewarded because they're in on it too. Catholic Relief Services and the U.S. Conference of Bishops, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, USCCB. They get a bunch of money. They're still getting a bunch of money for this. It became a huge windfall for the Catholic Church and the bishops. The grants are in the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars right now for migrant services to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And this is what came out of it. This is the evil. It's unbelievable. Pope Francis was behind this. And he put the Catholic Church in a position to be partners with cartels in their human trafficking. That's the almost insurmountable evil. He did that. And he did it with Cardinal McCarrick. And he did it with Joe Biden. And he did it with Barack Obama. They did this. They did other things. They did stuff where they were working on the Iran nuclear deal. The Pope went to the Middle East and worked on the Iran nuclear deal. That's why McCarrick went back and forth to Iran. They betrayed the Catholic Church in China. China had a traditional underground Catholic Church that was very strong. And when Pope Francis came in, they changed the way they dealt with China and basically turned the Catholic Church over to the Chinese communists. And they let them choose the bishops in China. And the Catholic Church traditionalists were like, wait a minute, you betrayed us. And so there's 3 main parts of what Pope Francis did that really betrayed the church and betrayed what the church is supposed to be. The church is there as ministering to Catholics Jesus' word, to present it's not a social agency. It's not a social outcome agency. But they involve themselves in politics. They involve themselves in the Middle East peace process. They involve themselves in the China relationship, and they involved themselves in opening the borders. And it wasn't just in America; they did it in Europe too. So this is a very they call it synod. They have this synod approach to the Catholicism. It's activism. It's activism hiding behind religion, and it's not the way it should be. I mean, they basically destroyed the separation of church and state. Pope Francis is working for Obama and Biden.
And the last part, you really alluded to the actions of Catholic Charities when it comes to the current quote unquote migrant crisis. So then the question I have for you is, you just talked about all this human trafficking. We've had whistleblowers within the administration, like Tara Rodas and others, talk about the border issue and the human trafficking of children, both sexually and for labor. We're not seeing any type of criminal investigations or prosecutions. All we're hearing are rhetoric and talking points from one side about how they need to fix the border in a bipartisan manner. And even on the other side with Trump, although he is talking about these horrific acts, I don't see any criminal accountability within any administrations or organizations, right? There's not even any chatter about that. The talking point is we're going to have the biggest mass deportation we've ever seen. Fine. Where's the criminal accountability? Is there any hope in this, especially with the level of corruption that you've seen in the Catholic Church?
Well, I don't know how the Catholic Church polices itself, but our country has to start honoring its laws. And there has to be a mass deportation. There's an estimate, I think Border Patrol or Customs and Border Patrol came out, 300,000 kids since 2014, since that first group came in, have come in here and they get these, they get like a court date, and then they get released to like a guardian, and no one knows who the guardians are. They're not really searched. 300,000 kids since 2014 have just vanished. They didn't come back for their court dates. Where did they go? What happened to them? 300,000 kids just came to America and were spirited away by somebody to do something somewhere. And it's a dark blot on our history. And it was put there by the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, by the drug cartels, and by Joe Biden and Barack Obama. And we've got to get to the bottom of it. It's horrific. It is an almost insurmountable evil. We'll get to the bottom of it by shining sunlight on it, but that's the only way.
The Case to Impeach and Imprison Joe Biden is the book. We're going to take one final break. We'll be back with Mike McCormick and more Making Sense of the Madness after this.
Did you know that thousands of authors across the country have written books and published them with Page Publishing? If you've written a book, Page Publishing can help you through the process. We cut through the confusion of the publishing world to make it easy for you. If we decide to publish your book, your work ends and ours begins. From copy editing and proofing to typesetting and book cover art, we get you printed, distributed, and sold on Amazon, Apple iTunes, and in bookstores across the country. We'll even help you promote your book. That's right, we do all this for you. Biography, self-help, mystery, novels, sci-fi, even a children's book. No matter what genre, Page Publishing can bring your book to life. Call today for your free author submission kit and find out how you can be the next published author at Page Publishing.
Call for your free author submission kit at 855-993-2114. That's 855-993-2114.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, It's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Final segment with Mike McCormick. Now, Mike, the DNC, obviously long and gone. I would argue the Barack star had his moment up there. It was like a platinum selling artist going on tour again, like the Eagles rejoining for the 25th time,
Right.
and just seeing him. And he was nailing it. And, I got to tell you, as far as everybody up there, he's energized. He's still very much the iconic face of the current party. Certainly, when you see Bill Clinton at this stage in his life, the baton has been passed. You were there when you had this you saw this relationship between Joe Biden, who was, senior gangster level politician that had been working with the executive branch of the DC ghouls for a very long time. A lot of people forget Delaware is there for a reason. It's called money laundering. So, the corporate aspect as well. Barack's obviously coming to his own. 8 years in the White House, on the periphery during the Trump presidency. And many believe running the country, at least as a proxy, as Michael Flynn says, during this administration, moving over to D.C. In your opinion, first of all, what was their personal relationship that you witnessed like? And then into the political relationship. And how much validity do you give those who believe that in a lot of ways he was running the country the last 4 years?
I've been arguing for a while now that it was Biden who was more the puppeteer than the puppet these last 4 years. I mean, I've seen Joe Biden behind the scenes work his way up from, he wasn't very well known as vice president. As a senator, when he ran for president in 2008, he bombed out within weeks of the first primary, and Obama took over. But he worked his way into the White House as a vice president, and he got all the choice assignments. And that always kind of puzzled me. How is Joe Biden getting these choice assignments? He got the choice assignments for the Alliance for Prosperity. Why did Joe Biden do that? Why didn't Barack Obama do more? And I feel, well, I've said this and I say this in my new book. I think that Joe Biden had leverage on Barack Obama. I think he knew things about his private life. I think Barack Obama had gay relationships, and that Joe Biden knew that. And he used that as leverage when he was, quote unquote, the last guy in the room to say, Barack, I want this assignment. So he got the assignment to Iran or to Iraq. He got the assignment to be the Asia pivot guy. He got the Alliance for Prosperity assignment. He got the gun control assignment. Why did he get all those choice assignments? I think because he had that leverage. Why do I say that about Barack Obama? When we were stenographers, we had people in our office who were dating people in the inner circle of the Obama group. And we had a guy in our office who very early on, when I first started working with Joe Biden, he was the guy who was the vice president stenographer before me. And he started dating Michelle Obama's designer, the woman who picked out all her outfits. And he would go on dates with her to the White House, to these big functions. So one night he came back from Michelle Obama, one day early in the morning, he came into the office. The night before he'd been at Michelle Obama's birthday party, he met Paul McCartney and all these luminaries. And I was like, hey, how was it? He was like, oh yeah, I got to meet these guys. And I said, so it was pretty cool. He goes, you know what? It was all so fake. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, it's all so fake. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, it's a corporate marriage? He goes, yeah, it's a corporate marriage. So he was talking about the Obamas. And, in D.C., I've been in the White House at that point for several years. You hear about the corporate marriage, sort of the show relationships that are in politics around D.C. And so that wasn't a big deal to me. But I started looking at how Barack Obama handled himself after that. And he was very particular about where his wife and children were when he went to Chicago. He would go to Chicago for a lot of weekends in 2011, 2012, because that's where his campaign office was. He'd stay at their house. They had a house in Chicago, but his wife and kids would never go home with them. I noticed that. We got the Air Force One passenger manifest in our office. And I noticed that, and I was like, how come he's going home, but he doesn't take Michelle and the kids with him? That's their house too. That's their neighborhood. That's their, why don't they go back there? And it was strange to me. And it was noted in the press. There was a press guy who asked about it once in a background briefing. And he said, what do you do when you come to Chicago? And Obama looked at, and I was cued in on this. I was in the room. It was kind of an odd coincidence that I was in the room for that. And this Obama looked at me and goes, oh, we just drive around the old neighborhood and look at the houses. Well, that's not what presidents do. Presidents go in a motorcade point to point as fast as they can. They don't drive around. So it was a deflection answer. He did not want to answer this guy's question. And this guy, his name is Mark Silva. He was from, I think, the Chicago Sun-Times. He was a Chicago reporter. He wanted to know for Chicago editors, what is Obama doing when he comes back here? And he wouldn't answer. So to me, there's other things that I talk about. And I recorded it in a Substack. The Substack is Midnight in a Laptop of Good and Evil. I did like about a 15-minute recording, sort of all the things that kind of added up to me thinking, there's something going on here. The corporate marriage is more about Barack covering his real identity, and Joe Biden knows that, and Joe Biden's getting away with this stuff. So as their relationship, once Joe Biden became president, came out, everyone said Joe Biden's the puppet and Obama's the puppeteer. I don't think that really came to the fore until earlier this summer. I think Joe Biden thought of himself as the leader. He always had a huge ego and thought of himself as the number one politician in the country, the smartest guy, even though Obama was, the heralded, the amazing person of the Democratic Party. Biden behind the scenes always thought he was smarter and better at foreign policy. That's his big ego. And so Joe Biden over the last 4 years had his big ego roaming around the White House with probably Obama keeping tabs. But it wasn't, they really had to shove Joe out. And now we've got this situation where we've got a president, we're not sure what he's doing. We've got a lot of compromised people in Washington, and we don't know how well they're going to handle the fact that this MAGA rise, the rise of Trump is coming. I really think there is going to be momentum for Trump growing and growing, and it has to become a successful election for him. I pray that it's a successful election for him, because if it's not, our country's lost. There's no way at this point in time Kamala Harris can be viewed as a legitimate presidential contender against who President Trump is, given all he's up against. They try to assassinate him this summer. They try to put him in jail. They may yet try to put him in jail with a sentence. I mean, this is just
September is coming. Listen, Mike, I don't think anything's out of the woods. I don't think a second assassination attempt is off the table. And let me just say this about you. You're one of the few people out there that said there was no way that Michelle Obama was going to be the nominee because she hated the side of politics. And it kind of seemed that way behind the scenes. Now, even the Trump administration, or the Trump campaign rather, was worried that may happen as she was a viable candidate. Can you just in these final few minutes kind of talk about why you knew it wasn't going to be Michelle Obama?
Well, I think it goes to their relationship. She did not enjoy her time in Washington. She's I like Michelle Obama. Beautiful woman, loving mother, dedicated political wife. I travel with her a couple times. I write about her in the new book a little bit. But she didn't enjoy being this sort of beard. I mean, that's not a fun thing to do. She didn't want to go back to that. So she wasn't going to come back to the White House and all the junk she had to do in D.C. She wanted to get out. She'd raise her kids. They're beautiful young girls. And she wanted to, have a life without all the political BS. So that's what she's done. I knew she wasn't going to come back.
Mike, in this final couple of minutes, let everybody know where they can get your book, when the next one's coming, and how they can check you out on Substack as well.
The Substack is Midnight in a Laptop of Good and Evil. I haven't been posting a ton of stuff there because I've been busy writing the book. But there's a lot of stuff in the archives, and you can get on there for a small paywall. You just got $8 will get you into the archives. There's all kinds of stuff there. That's where I talk about the why I think Obama was gay thing. My book is on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, The Case to Impeach and Imprison Joe Biden. And the new book will be out hopefully mid-October. I'm pushing hard. I got to finish it over the next couple of days. Literally, you guys caught me right as I'm wrapping it up, so it was good timing.
Well, I'm glad that we got to talk about it because we are talking about high-level corruption, not just in U.S. politics, not just in business, but also religion. And culturally, this all really does come together. And, look, I think Trump's got his problems. I'm not a conservative. I'm not a Republican. I'm a constitutionalist at best. I don't like the fact that we've just had 4 years of the most outwardly puppeted dementia patient ever. I don't like the fact that the other person they're replacing him with has no real political values and agenda will sway in the wind to whatever donor or predator class wants to get behind it. And, I really do fear that we may be in the throes of the final evisceration of our Constitution and Bill of Rights here. And I know that you're fighting back against that. So we appreciate you, Mike, and we appreciate you guys watching this show 5 days a week right here on Patriot.tv, where the truth lives. I want to tell you, it's not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I love you guys. We'll see you on the flip side.